Hello, hello. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. I hope wherever you are, you're having a good time. Whenever time you're watching this video, I wish you the best. I hope you're doing great. So, as you can see, I'm making this video in the middle of the night because I just came from school. I took a metro, cost me like $4 instead of a bus. So I came a little bit earlier, but not too early enough to make this video on the early in the afternoon. So today's video is going to be about the economics of China, but before I go into that, I'm going to focus much more on what I did today. So I went to school and I read some research paper. As you can see here, I have another paper that's in there that I'm going to be reviewing tomorrow, but I'm going to be talking about this paper today that I read and I had to share in the classroom. Now when I got here, I didn't have food, so I had to put my food in the microwave. So as the food is warming up, it's supposed to be 15 minutes. So by the time the food is finishing warming up, I should be able to make this video. So it's a 15 minutes video. But anyway, so as you already know, as I mentioned earlier, I was reading a paper written by somebody. His name is Josh Luna, and other co-authors and writers. This paper talks about the appropriate entrepreneurship and the rise of China and developing world. It's basically talking about how China has influenced many countries and it's done a great job compared to the United States. I talked about this last time on how China is influencing the world, and as right now as we speak, the US government is trying to combat China in terms of trade deficit, because we're the biggest consumer. But for years, the US has been like the richest country, and it is still the richest country in the world. But it hasn't done much to the developing countries like in Africa and Middle East and Asia. But when China became developed in 2013, when it boomed, right? We saw China developing faster in 2013 all the way to this day. Their development, their booming was influencing even poor countries. We saw poor countries developing, like we see countries like Kenya, Nigeria, building highways, high-speed railways, right? So, and the economy was improving. They have solar panels, they have education. Same thing with India, same thing with Afghanistan and Iraq. And what did China do that the US didn't do, right? And that's a big question, because the US has been involved in these countries for a while, right? They have involved in wars and the aid. We see USAID, and I think part of the reason why Trump eliminated the USAID is because USAID was not effective enough. Meanwhile, China came in and they didn't do any aid. They just give either loans or they just they put in the local economy and they boosted the local economy. There was local investments, and so this paper looks at suitability. Suitability means the idea that if the countries are sharing the same struggle, the same background, is it easy for these countries to develop faster? So for instance, African countries, they share the same economy, right? So assume one country in Africa develops, does that mean all countries are going to develop? And according to these statistics, the answer goes yes. Because you see, for instance, China was colonized, right? And they had struggles in the past, and they had normal economy, right? They have poor people, lack of food, like all those things. But when the country boomed, right, when they discovered the minerals and the resources and they developed faster, they were able to replicate this system to poor countries because there was some sort of solidarity or commonality, something similar. But in the United States, so the Western countries, there has been, one country was a colonizer than the other. So you have very different distinct, you have different populations, different sort of education, different struggles, right? In the United States, we see colonies who obviously had the money and the resources being the one controlling the country and being the one holding the massive wealthy money. So when they try to replicate this idea of, whether it's entrepreneurship, technology, innovations, education to other countries that are poor, it's hard to replicate because there's no really connections. They don't really connect to each other. So This paper was absolutely biased. I wanna say I told this to my professor as well, because it does exclude in the Western, and also it undermines things like the aid the US has been putting in there. My speculation was that maybe the aid that US gave, like USAID, I mean, as money or money that the US gives to these countries, Africa, Middle East, this money have been that was used to consume Chinese goods, so they've been used to work with Chinese entrepreneurs. But the statistics, the significance was true, was positive. They found out that, in fact, China's rise, the rising of China, is positively correlated to the rising of serial entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs from poor countries, something that they haven't seen before in many years. So, but they did not really specify the political reason behind it. They didn't really mention if China was directly involved in this development. There was no statistics, because China does not give their data to the world. They give everything to themselves. But they try to track the venture capitalist companies that could have been influenced by China. They couldn't find any of those. And I want to make sure this was not based on the government. So there's a direct investment from the government to African or poor countries that was not involved in here. This was based purely on personal individual venture capitalists. So people who are just investing individually, like they have no influence from the government, whether from China or to the poor countries. And they found out that people in poor countries who did invest, they were influenced not by the government, whether the government or Chinese government, but they were influenced by the Chinese venture capitalist private investors. So this was a very interesting, and again, the suitability became a big player here, because they did also another study where they found out that Brazil, a country that has involved in agriculture, because of the historical part of the country, they are able to replicate the agricultural system to African nations, and there was a positive outcome. So this was interesting to think about it, and it was interesting to see that as we look at Africa and the African and the Middle East and some countries in Asia, we kind of see that no matter what we do in the Western countries, sometimes we might be missing some elements, some key issues. The paper was basically based on why, because when countries that are developing faster, they have savings. So you have middle class system, right? The middle class is working class. People, everyone who's working is a middle class. When they work, they make income, and then when they make income, they spend a portion of it to consume, and then another portion goes to savings. So that drives the economy higher. Like in America, for example, we have large income. We have the largest middle income class here. People who are working in finance, people like me, go to school, get education, get a job. We are part of the income system, middle income system. So when we make money, like if I get a job and I make money, I'm gonna spend that money in buying a house, or putting my kids in school, buy a car. That consumerism drives the economy. And then you have people like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. These people are known as serial entrepreneurs. They take the risk, they invest so much money, and but having these serial entrepreneurs is very hard, because nobody wants to take the risk. But for many years before the rising of China, they have seen Western countries trying to bypass the serial investors or serial entrepreneurs to go directly to the institutions, governments, influencing the government, but there was no result. There was no positive outcome. However, when China came up, they, instead of influencing the government, there's people in China who are private investors. They kind of influenced each other. They also found out that these African or these poor countries, I say Africans, but they are more poor countries like Middle East, sometimes in Eastern Europe as well as Asia and South America. These countries had people who were looking for the opportunities that China did not provide. So they compared themselves, which is sortability, and after comparing themselves to China, then they will say, okay, what does China doesn't have that I can produce, right? And that was so that confidence proves that because there was some sort of sense of understanding each other, knowing each other, made it easier for these poor countries to have a large number of serial entrepreneurs. Another key sector that they didn't really describe as much is the fact that they didn't really touch much on the failure versus success. How many of these venture capitalists are successful? How many venture capitalists have not been able to make it? So all of these statistics, all of these findings are very crucial. They're very understandable, especially for me as I'm going to be doing an internship in the venture capitalist. Venture capitalist is very hard risk. It's a risk industry where you don't know the outcome. Start from scratch, so you have to look for the opportunities. So it's understanding that not just in the United States but also in other countries is crucial. US has seen a drop number from 1990s. The number has dropped, the number of serial entrepreneurs, and we already know, like we know from 2000s, we had Google, we have Facebook, we have Amazon, we had Instagram, but that has like shut off. Like from 2008, everything has been cut off. We haven't seen much entrepreneurship. But then 2011 to 2013, China introduced the idea of made in China, and all that attracted many investors. But not only that, but also the local communities, the local people in China, they felt empowered. They felt the need to build their own businesses, and I think this is what Donald Trump is trying to do. Trump is trying to also copy China's model, where they can do empower the American people to invest and not just to save, not just focus on working, but also invest, look for the opportunities that are needed, AI, all those things that could boost the local economy. So it's a very interesting research, very interesting reading. I just did not really like the bias in it because the research was specifically based on China. But they didn't really mention they try to avoid the politics. They did not mention the politics. In 2013, we see China voting for Xi Jinping, who came to power, and I don't know if they voted for him. I think he was raised through this Chinese Communist Party, and this has been one of the indicator that has boosted. We see China like developing faster after they voted for him. So that sort of like pushed China to the edge. What could have led China to develop faster? What did the CCP do that made China develop faster? Did they put in the money? Did they, empower their own people? We don't know. We actually know. We never know. But in 2020, for some reason, this is during COVID, China stopped allowing venture capitalists to go out there and invest in poor countries on their own without the Chinese involvement. So China took over all companies, right? All the venture capitalists was taken over. So now everything's in the hand of the Communist Party. So what I had to ask the professor is, did they take them out because they did not see any outcome? He says no. It's an ongoing research. So that was today. I hope I was able to explain it better, but check it out. It's called appropriate entrepreneurship, which means appropriate means entrepreneurship that can help other people. If you can build Facebook, but only I help some American people, not everyone else, that is inappropriate. It's irrelevant. If you can build AI, but only benefits people from the United States, that's relevant. But if it benefits everyone else around the world, that's called appropriate entrepreneurship. So That's all I had for today. Like always, I want to appreciate for watching. If you reach this side, and I'll always take care. Bye bye. Ciao ciao.